We'll probably just go ahead and cruise into this. So thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you very much for tuning in. Welcome to the fourth installment of the METOS KNOWS and You Will Too webinar. Again, my name is Derek Brosda and the Key Accounts Manager for METOS USA, and I'll be the host of this event. Today we are in for a sweet treat. Whether you enjoy them mixed up in a smoothie, sliced and topped on your favorite dessert, or simply eating them whole out of the container, strawberries are a giant in the agriculture industry. Over 7 million metric tons were grown globally in 2020, and that number continues to rise each year. Joining us today from Driscoll's Strawberry Associates is a global plant health manager, Dr. Jenny Broome. Dr. Broome has been working with the Driscoll's team since 2010 and holds a PhD in plant pathology from the University of California, Davis. Through 4 generations spanning over 100 years, Driscoll's has been a staple brand in the production of strawberries across the United States. Today, Dr. Broome is going to talk a little bit about the challenges different plant diseases can cause and how to ensure the highest quality for your berries. Additionally, from the UK, we have Simon Turner, Managing Director of Agritech Services. Simon's business has incorporated unique strategies to help growers have a full understanding of what's happening out in their fields and tunnels throughout the year, incorporating technology and industry knowledge to help mitigate risk as much as possible. Simon's going to showcase what he does to service the berry industry customers across the UK. One thing to note before we get started, today we're actually broadcasting this show in multiple languages. So we have Mariana for our Spanish listeners, Eleonora and Lara for our Italian listeners, and Ruth for our German-speaking listeners. If you haven't done so but would like to change the language of the presentation, go ahead and click the link down on the bottom bar and go ahead and do that now. So, as always, I'll ask everybody, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A section at the bottom bar. We'll get through both presenters, and if your question has not been answered, then there'll be a few minutes at the end for going through those. So again, thank you everybody for being here. Before we get started, Dr. Broome, Simon, thank you both for being here today. I know you're both extremely busy, so we appreciate you taking some time to spend with us and educate everybody. How are you guys doing today?
Very good, thanks.
Yeah, we're all good and very happy to be here. So thank you for the invite.
No, not a problem. Dr. Broome, we were kind of joking before as we were getting ready. I think I've got your #1 fan upstairs right now. I went up this morning, and my 1-year-old was just completely covered in strawberries. She was just eating them out of the bucket for breakfast. So I should have taken a picture. I could have shared it with everybody to get a good laugh, but she's definitely the #1 strawberry fan in this house. So
Excellent. Yes, that's one of the benefits of working with berries. You get to eat them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and get kicked off. Jenny, we'll go ahead and have you go first. So if you want to go ahead and pull up your presentation, and we will get started.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, really pleased to be here, and I've been working with Driscoll's for about 10 years now, and really before that worked with grapes, and that's when I first connected actually with Gottfried Pessel and with METOS. So we've had a long and productive relationship over the years. And so I'm real excited to share with you some recent thoughts and work we've been doing with METOS, mostly in California and Mexico some, but there's many more countries that METOS, that Driscoll's grows in, and so more opportunities, I'm sure. I'm talk about weather data and disease risk models in berry crops, Mostly I'm going to focus on production fields for fruit, but there are lots of roles for using these systems in our nursery plant production as well. So environmental conditions are hugely important to berry crops. And as I said earlier, what people like to experience, a moderate climate, Mediterranean climates, berries also enjoy. So we tend to often grow on the west coasts of a variety of continents and places. We grow all 4 berry crops, but I'll mostly talk about strawberry today. Raspberry is the more sensitive, really thrives under the plasticulture tunnels. And strawberry also is impacted by weather. Blueberry a little less, although it has its own special requirements. And then blackberry is the kind of hardiest and or grows in the warmer regions. Plant surface wetness, relative humidity, fog, dew, rain, overhead irrigation for plant establishment. Those are all crucial elements of our production system and impact the health of the crop as well as disease issues. Shade and sunlight are also very important, and soil, and we grow in substrate as well. And those, again, that's a key area for monitoring of environmental conditions for precision farming in the substrate systems. Over to the right here, that's my logo for the department I've helped build over the last 10 years at Driscoll's. And at the heart of it is the plant disease triangle. So again, you need to have pathogens present, you monitor your climate and use that information. And then we have our 4 berry crops there. That's sort of the heart of my program. Having weather stations for a company like Driscoll's is really important. We use a variety of weather tools, it's true, not just on-farm stations, but we use them for crop forecasting, for collaborative projects with our district people, for integrated disease management research. They reside at our key proprietary breeding test plots, demonstration farms. We use them for irrigation and fertility management, pest management tools, optimizing fungicide use and managing fungicide resistance risk, and then just in general disease management efficiency, trying to save money, and regulatory compliance, drift, irrigation, water quality and quantity as well. Just a quick example, in California, we have a lot of regulations and issues related to avoiding off-site movement of pesticides are crucial. We need to know our wind speed is the wind speed should be over 3 miles per hour or under 10 miles per hour to avoid off-site movement. We need to detect temperature inversions in California, that's important, and can increase exposure to pesticides and various other factors. So regulatory compliance is a part of having this kind of precision data on farm, and for a marketing and breeding company like Driscoll's. I'll just note our growers are independent growers, and so the place where we do the most growing is actually in our nursery, as I mentioned, it being an important area. So in terms of strawberry, the key diseases we care about most, and we feel there are models out there, and indeed METOS has some variation on these models in their systems. The strawberry powdery mildew is one I developed based on Doug Gubler's original grape powdery mildew model. It's mostly just driven by temperature. And in California climate, that seems appropriate. In other places and under tunnels, I think relative humidity needs to be included. Strawberry gray mold is the model I've worked with is similar to the one that METOS has in their system, but was developed on grapes, and I'll share a little bit of that work. And then Colototricum acutatum, work out of Florida, Natalia Perez, that's an important model in Florida and also in potentially our nurseries. For Caneberry, we haven't done as much with it, but I would love to do more work with raspberry cane botrytis, and it can be quite an impactful disease, as you can see here, with this sort of bare, non-blind buds coming out of the cane. And then blackberry downy mildew could be a good disease to do some more work on in the future, but is not currently available, especially for Mexico. In blueberry, currently in the system, there is just the blueberry anthracnose in METOS. However, I noticed they had a teaser there, talking about some other possible models, and I would encourage them to definitely look into those, because botrytis is important in certain parts of the world where we're shipping fruit long distances, phomopsis in the Pacific Northwest, and mummyberry also. And then I would add blueberry rust can be impactful in some areas. So to go a little more detail now on the development of the powdery mildew model, which is there in the METOS system. Mildew is kind of ubiquitous, it's everywhere, it's an obligate parasite, it can come on the plants or from your neighbors. It is impactful at different growth stages of the plant and can be a very explosive disease, driven a lot by temperature. So we took the grape model, which has a slightly different temperature optimum, shown here as 21 to 30 degrees C. We slightly lowered it for strawberries and where they grow to 18 to 27 degrees C. We know a lot about the organism. It's optimum for germination, for growth. We know the relative humidity conditions. We know that actual free moisture is not conducive to the disease. It actually can control the disease alone without a chemical. And we know that tunnels have higher temperatures, generally, no free moisture or rain due to their umbrella function, but higher relative humidity, and we see much more mildew there, as I'm sure Simon will share with us some of his work in the UK with tabletops under tunnels. And so this model, I won't go into much detail here, but it is related to the hours in the optimum temperature range. You add points if you're in the suboptimum, too hot for mildew, like over 32 degrees Celsius for a certain amount of time. You subtract points, you keep the risk between 0 and 100, and you change your spray intervals for fungicides based on the risk level. And you get at it through the either online or on your smartphone, you can get the results. And we have been testing, working with METOS since 2015, looking at the mildew model and confirming it works. And here's just one little quick picture. I think the key in California, in certain areas, it's almost always optimum mildew temperature, but the key is the early season. So this is showing you some lower risk numbers at the early season of one of our trials. Also then this shows you during the middle of the season, it's 100%, it's just high risk. And anybody who knows Santa Maria on the coast there knows it is a mildew paradise. But we did some trials and we found some promising results. We tend to plant 2 different seasons, as we call it, summer plant, which is the shorter season, but you are planting right into sort of optimum mildew conditions. So it's the most challenging. And indeed, we had 5 treatments. We had organic and we had conventional farming tools, Quintac and rotations with Rally. And then we had oxidate and serenade materials. And we followed the model and we followed a calendar spray. And this was with a contract research group called Pacific Ag Research, and they have a well set up system for focused replicated small plot trials. And this was early on, so I don't think we had the mildew model in the METOS system, so we did it by hand, but the second years it was in the METOS. And we sprayed and followed disease and marketable yield. And what we found was indeed, during the summer plant season, there was a lot of high risk, but toward the end of the season, we could save some sprays. So our summer plant, we had 11 applications using the mildew risk versus 18 based on calendar. So we saved 7 sprays. There was a high disease pressure and we got equivalent yields. So timing of the modification of the Gubler-Thomas was equally good and saved 7 sprays, which would have saved about $250 an acre, and disease control remained similar, and there was high disease pressure in the untreated plots. We then came back and did 2 more years of trialing in what we call the winter plant. So it's a longer season. We're planting in the fall and harvesting through June of the next year. And so there's some time in the winter where there's less mildew conducive conditions. So we were interested to see how the system would work then. And again, I won't go into all the details, but we had a conventional and organic, and we followed the model and we followed the calendar. And what we found was we could do 14 fewer sprays just following the model, saved an average of $400 an acre in 2015 and $500 an acre in 2016. But of course, it would be unique depending on your environment, and you don't want to assume you will always save sprays. There can be years where the model may tell you to spray more than you might in a calendar program. So in the end, the disease was fairly similar. There was slightly more disease in the risk model, but it was not hugely impactful. And the yield was the same. In fact, we thought it was a little better because there was a little less sulfur actually used in the model, and sulfur can be harmful to strawberries, even if it's efficacious against mildew, etc. So it was a real success. I think I'm okay, got a little more time. I talked briefly about botrytis, which is another disease near and dear to my heart. I did my doctorate work on table grapes with it. And we developed this model that is quite similar to the Madden botrytis model and also an Australian model, and fairly similar to what METOS has in their system. And of course, the flowers get infected, you get dead flowers, you get damaged fruit, and it drives a fair amount of pesticide use in California. We did some of our work in Chile. We went to this is very dark here in these overhead table grape vineyards. And we developed a model that, as they would say, quince for 15 degrees Celsius for 15 hours, puts you about here in this surface response model that we developed. So we looked at a range of temperatures and a range of wetness durations, and infection happened the most at this tip here of 100% of the berries diseased. So we tested it and found it to work quite well in Chilean table grapes. So I then, actually before coming to work at Driscoll's, while I was still at UC Davis, we tested this model in strawberry fields for 2 years, and basically found similar disease control with 1 year fewer applications, but in the second year at one location, we did end up spraying more, but we got better disease control. I will show that here. You can see at the top that this is showing the index at the bottom, and indeed the disease spikes up. We have the blue is the untreated, the pink is the calendar, and the yellow is the sprays according to the model. So we got up to about 25% disease incidence with the control in the calendar, and the botrytis model was down at about 12%. So it definitely seemed in this location to be a successful program. And then down below, you can see the weather-driven spikes in the index when there was a risk event. Similarly, at the second location, Prunedale, we also saw better control with the model, the calendar was pretty similar to the model, but the control, definitely there was disease pressure there. So we also use growing degree day models for crop forecasting. I don't think I have time to go into details, but if you want to read some more about it and how we do it, and we can talk about it more later if people have questions, but it's important not to forget the crop and the importance of temperature and driving. It's for a company like Driscoll's, we need to know exactly when our growers are going to have how much crop so we can market it. So it's a hugely important aspect of the company. And we have been using some METOS stations as well as other weather tools to, as well as in-field monitoring to successfully do our crop forecasting. So then to just summarize again, we use it in crop forecasting, we do research, we use it to manage our proprietary breeding programs, fertilize and irrigation, pest management. I've talked to you about 2 pathogens that are important in strawberry. We want to manage resistance risk. We do support our nursery as well as our fruiting field and regulatory compliance. And with that, I think I'll stop and pass it on to Simon. And just for fun, I thought I'd share, like I said, I used to work with the wine grape industry. And at one point we helped this company, Dolce, make a botricized wine. So I wanted people to remember not all botrytis is terrible. And when we inoculated, that didn't give us any benefit. What was most important was the misting. This company spent a good chunk of money to try to reproduce what happens naturally in France. And it's an amazing drink. And you can watch the grapes rot on the Dolce webcam if you're interested. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to hearing from others. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Jenny. That's you have to remember that it might be morning for you and I, but to our friends over in Europe, it's probably getting close to about wine time of the day. So we might have some people stepping away to go refill their glasses. But I have a question for you, or something that I kind of wanted to just touch on, because really, you have a unique angle on the berry market, because both, you're looking at it from the production standpoint, you're looking at it from the cost return on investment standpoint, and Driscoll's in particular, you're looking at it from the social responsibility standpoint. I mean, where the market is driving businesses such as yours to employ. I mean, this is what when you went through your you reduced application model, where it should, you'd saved 6 passes here, 7 passes there. And yeah, that does have a financial impact, but it also means that, you're showing to your customers, you're doing everything possible to reduce the amount of chemicals that are applied on this. And you're using the science behind it. I mean, how much of that do you think comes from the social pressure that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question, Derek. It's definitely an important part of Driscoll's. We take very seriously sustainability, work that we do. We prioritize water because that's a huge issue, especially in California and drought years. We are reducing plastic, but also, giving the consumer what they want and documenting and using research to enable that is hugely important. And especially actually in the UK, some of our growers in Europe as well are very aware of the importance of, and there's some work around everything from residue-free farming certification efforts to, of course, organic. Driscoll's has a big commitment to organic. Organic is challenging because the tools are not as good as the conventional, but it also as a researcher is intriguing, and we have quite a few tricks up our sleeve, and we can make it work. So we're and we really believe there's a better flavor often with our organic berries. So for us, it's all about flavor and sustainability in terms of giving our consumers what they want.
Yeah, and sustainability is such a hard topic to discuss, because it means different things to different people. So when you are able to lump in the environmental impact, you're able to lump in we're showing our growers a higher return on investment by not having to make these applications, or at least knowing the timing of these applications better. And one thing that you mentioned that it really fits into what I think our business model is, and to kind of segue into Simon's presentation, is there are a lot of tools in the toolbox, whether that's weather stations, in-field monitoring, moisture sensors. It's all a part of this big kind of a holistic approach to understanding how to improve our agricultural systems. And it starts with people in the field, doing the research. So I want to thank you for, I know you've helped our disease model team on certain things. I know that Petru and you out in California have a really good working relationship. So thank you for everything, and thanks for being a part of this today. So Simon, we're talking systems approach to agriculture. I think we're kind of stepping into your wheelhouse here, right?
You just step right into it, I think. Step right into it. Yeah. Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everybody, depending on where you're listening. Let me just see if I can share the right screen, which I didn't manage to do in the dry run. I think I have.
There we go. You're good.
Is it all good? Excellent. Yeah, look, I mean, tools in the toolbox, it's nicely put. I think what I'm hoping to share with everyone this afternoon, or very briefly, is how we've incorporated the tools in the toolbox into our business. The tools can't farm for you, but they certainly, but boots on the ground are still an essential part of the everyday businesses. But these tools do, if you know how to use them, can help you make key decisions. And so, you know, we've been doing that for the past sort of almost 30 years. So a bit of brief background on Agritech. I came out of farm management back in the early 90s and founded Agritech. And the focus then was actually using an instrument I found being used in Australia to measure soil moisture and accurately schedule irrigation. Because up until that point, the way decisions were being made on how to irrigate were fairly crude, from literally kicking the soil and seeing dust came off the boot. And I thought, well, there must be a more scientific approach to that.
That's how a lot of people still do it, though.
Well, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. So there's room for improvement. So it was the late 90s when, in fact, we deployed our first telemetry-based soil moisture monitoring systems. And that also coincided when we were looking also at climate monitoring as well, because it was around that time that certainly in the UK, berry growers started to cover their crops, finding technology being used in countries like Spain, where the Spanish tunnels were widely used. And it meant that, yes, we could extend our season, because up to that point, it was literally a matter of weeks, and we could keep the rain off the crop, which was a big issue. So botrytis suddenly became much less of an issue. But of course, as soon as you cover fields with plastic, you create a microclimate. And it's fair to say we probably had very little understanding of that microclimate in the early days. And around the early 2000s, we introduced a range of precision farming services, more geared towards our broadacre cropping plants. But the topography mapping element of that we do use today for irrigation design purposes. So, as I mentioned, we've been analysing in-field sensor data for the best part of 30 years. I guess it was the late 2009, somewhere about there, we used our first cloud-based solution system, because it was around that time that the cost of having such technology in the field became affordable. And that served very well. We were using continual monitoring sensors linked to a sort of a homemade data transfer unit to send data to the cloud, which was supplied by a third party. And that worked extremely well, but latterly our business has taken us to beyond the UK shores. I was actually going to ask Jenny what the temperature was in California at the moment, but decided not to, because we're experiencing the coldest spring for over 100 years here, and it'd probably make me very envious. But you know, we are dealing with growers in China, Portugal, South Africa, to name but a few. And therefore, we needed to find a global supplier, really. Not only a supplier, but someone who had a global support network to introducing this hardware onto farm, such that we could work with those suppliers to do that. And I have to say, I must thank David Wattoff, who runs METOS UK. David's been completely instrumental in getting us going, not only in supplying, but supporting our activity. So I thank him a lot. But we do recognise, or did recognise, that we needed some in-house cloud-based system for collating all this information and presenting it to people, because our philosophy is this: yes, smart sensor technology has its place in the farming business, but the sensors themselves, so long as they do what they say they do on the tin, that's great. But it's the way the data is presented, how it's used, and then implemented practically is really the key to the success of this. So we wanted to create a dashboard that had the potential to talk to any sensor that sends data via an API. And our preferred choice, having worked with a number now, is definitely the METOS one. It's so easy to incorporate or get hold of their data from their API and bring it into your own. So I know Derek's going to mention a bit about this at the end, but I can only emphasise it's so easy to work with, and it's been so useful to us. So we started with soil moisture, and that's where we started with the METOS range, really. We wanted to get a good handle of what was going on in substrate production. We'd sort of mastered soil, but substrate was still 1-2 master. So we wanted to measure what was going on with moisture. We wanted to know what was going on with temperature and conductivity, or EC. And we also wanted a much better understanding of the climate, because the climate obviously has a big role in plant water demand. And essentially this little graph on the, or picture rather, on the right here, essentially what we're wanting to do is to look at how quickly that water reservoir, and it's fairly small in a strawberry bag, isn't it? How quickly that reservoir is emptying, when does it need to be filled, what frequency does it need to be filled? They were the questions that we need answers to. But in line with that, we were finding a lot of substrate producers were recording things still very manually. Most people, I think, are recording their ECs and pHs in their drip and drain and their runoff, and that seems to be manual wherever I go, whether it be recorded on some Excel spreadsheet somewhere, or worst case, some piece of paper which probably never gets looked at again. And to my mind, you know, the data that's been recorded is so important to making those decisions if we want to be precise at what we're doing. And it's the trends that we wanted to look at. So we've developed an app which is available for both Apple and Android, whereby irrigation teams can do just that. They can record their drip and drains in the field. When they get to a Wi-Fi zone, it synchronizes, and that syncs up with the database, so we can graph that data out. So very simply, we want to record it, sync it, view it. But over and above that, we were thinking then, well, what can we automate of that process? Certainly everyone's looking at labour, none more so than us in the UK with the Brexit subject, which I won't go into because we'll be here all night. But labour is certainly a key element that we're looking at. What can we do automatically? And that's where we've implemented the METOS low rain devices to record what's going in, what's coming out. And with an algorithm in the back end of our software, we can start to look at percentage runoff, not as a 24-hour average, because most people do that, but I wanted to look at what was the runoff percentage from each irrigation event. Because when someone says to me they had 25% runoff yesterday, that's great, but can you tell me when you had it? Most people can't. I want to know when that runoff happened. So we've designed a platform that is split into three. We've got on the far left here, looking at irrigation, moisture content within the root zone, individual sensor moisture content, so we can see what's going on within the bags or the pots, conductivity and temperature. We wanted to look at our drip and drains, our ECs and pHs, and we also wanted to look at the climate, because they're all integrated together. And so we created a dashboard that may not look very glamorous, but it gives you all the information you readily need. So there's the name of the field. We can quickly see here what the moisture contents are. This is a traffic light system, so these numbers change colour whether we're wet or dry. We've got our ECs and pHs sitting in the middle here, and over to the right here, our temperatures, our VPDs, and we've also got strawberry powdery mildew risk appearing. Interesting to listen to Jenny's talk on mildew. I'll come on to ours in a minute, but there's some very close synergies in what we're both finding, I think. But to drill down into the detail, we can go into the field and start to look at what's going on. So this is a root zone moisture content graph. This is actually from a strawberry bag. And effectively, we've split our moistures into 4 zones: blue, green, amber, and red. And depending on the time of day, growth stage of the crop, and indeed the climate, it will dictate whether we want to be up in the blue, the green, or the amber. And there may be times when we actually want to be in the red, in area inducing a bit of stress, particularly if we're trying to perhaps encourage a plant to switch from becoming or being vegetative to becoming generative. We might want to induce a little bit of stress. To have a handle and understanding of that, we felt was important. I've mentioned automatic drains. So simply using 2 rain gauges to measure what's going in and out. The graph on the left here, the solid blue bars here are the individual irrigations. The pale blue bars are the runoffs, and the pink in the background is actually calculating percentage runoff from each event. So I can see from here that from the first 3 irrigations, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, there was no runoff. Runoff started at the 4th. It really built here though, from 10 a.m. through to just before lunch was when the bulk of the runoff happened. the last few irrigations in the afternoon, there weren't any. So on that particular day, that was the right strategy for that grower. The overall average could have well have been the 20% number, but actually when you dissect this, some of these runoff percentages were as high as 60, 70%. But when you analyse it as an average over the 24-hour period, you come back to that 20. So we're trying to move away from the 24-hour average and look at the specifics. Interestingly, when we look at our moisture graph coinciding with our runoff graph, we can see where we've got to push our moisture to before we start to get runoff. So the two are very much interrelated. And we can see on this day here, when the moisture fell below this dotted blue line, although we were still irrigating, we were still getting moisture into those bags, runoff had actually ceased at that point. So we knew straight away, or the grower knew straight away, exactly where runoff commenced, where he got to get to, and therefore could plan his irrigation accordingly. We can also look at usage and gains. So this graph here is showing us, this is the water usage, the green or turquoise colour down here, the grey areas up here, the gains from the irrigations. And I've fairly badly drawn in a curve around these to highlight the curves, but this is your classic bell-shaped water use curve of the crops. You can see when it wakes up, starts to use water, peaks and closes off at night. So that's pretty useful information if you're trying to plan your irrigation. And of course that curve is completely dictated by not only growth stage, but more by changing weather. Another way we can look at this information is looking at irrigation hit lengths. If we turn our irrigation on for too long, for sure we might have lots of runoff, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've got the right moisture content in our pots and our bags. It simply means the water's pouring straight through. And so what this graph is showing me, this is a potted example, so this would be a cane fruit as opposed to strawberry. The top half of the pot here is getting a bigger gain from those irrigations than the bottom half. That means we are getting water penetrating through the pot and runoff, but it's not pouring straight through. So our irrigation hit length looks to be about right. In strawberry bags, we position the moisture probes horizontally. And what we want to see here is all sensors reacting in a similar way. If they're not, that would mean that, again, we haven't got our irrigation hit lengths quite right. And what we're aiming for essentially is this: uniformity within those bags, maximum lateral movement before we get that downward movement from gravity. So wherever we perhaps stuck a hand in to feel the moisture, it would be the same across the length of the bag. What we want to avoid is this, where we're getting wet areas but dry areas in between. And this is a nice example of a pot where the hit length has been, it's wrong. The hit length is too long. You can see here's the drippers. You can see it's wet through here, but either side, look at the coir here, it's as dry as a bone. So this could easily have been a high runoff example, but actually the irrigation wasn't behaving very well. And all you're going to get here is a salt build-up around the edges of those drippers. So that's not ideal. So that's how we can sort of perfect our irrigation. In terms of climate, using the METOS sensors, we use a lot of low-wrath sensors with little temperature humidity sensors. We're producing graphs like this so we can get a really good understanding of our temperatures, humidities, our VPDs. One can see here a high VPD day here on the December the 3rd. December the 4th, it's very different. So you can only imagine what the plant water demand differences were on 2 consecutive days. And this is what irrigation teams are challenged with on a daily basis, isn't it? Growing degree hours and chilling hours, fairly standard graphs, but this information all coming from those little climate sensors. So I think when you can pull this information to one central place, you can really start to make some key decision making from using these smart sensors. Now, I know Jenny's spoken about strawberry powdery mildew. I'm just going to spend last few minutes just talking about what we've done. I can't take the credit for this. Essentially, what's happened is a plant pathologist, Dr. Avis Hall from the University of Hertfordshire, who's known by a number of people, put the model together. She approached us because she wanted a platform for her model to sit on. And that's how we've worked together. So the system it's a decision support system. It's designed to support the grower for intelligent use of fungicide. So we're spraying when we need to, and avoiding spraying when we don't. And it was interesting hearing Jenny say earlier on that you were finding in the early part of the season, you were finding that's potentially when mildew conducive conditions are happening in a much slower speed, for want of a better word. And we're finding exactly the same thing here. So the prediction system is accumulating the number of hours in real time for that fungus to grow. Mildew can be financially damaging. It can be between a 20 and 70% crop loss. I've got a grower that I deal with here who lost, he claims, $750,000 in 2019. That's a big hit to take financially from a disease. And of course, the problem has been exacerbated by the introduction of polytunnels. We've got rid of botrytis, but now we've got our friend mildew. And conditions which are right for berry production are also right for mildew. And just as Jenny was saying earlier on, you know, we've got a number of people here overwintering crops. Don't assume there's no mildew. The mildew can carry over winter and be there in the following spring. Plants coming in from propagators, assume you're buying mildew in with the plant. I think that's the important thing to do. And we would always suggest a clean-up spray at the start of the season, belt and brace clean-up spray before you start running the model. But we define risk as the number of disease-conducive hours that have accumulated. And disease-conducive hours in the UK are hours where temperatures above 18 degrees Celsius, and in line with that, humidity is above 60%. When we have those conditions, that's when we start to accumulate. So here, anything under 50 hours is a reasonably low risk. Anything above 115 hours would be a high risk, and 144, we've seen from Avis's work, that is the sort of magic number, perhaps not to get to, but certainly not exceed. And at the end of the day, it's down to the grower to make the decision as to what fungicide they are going to use. I think it's probably the most feared epidemic disease, certainly is in the UK. And as a result of that, a lot of insurance spraying takes place here. And many growers are spraying every 7 days for mildew, pretty much from now right through to the end of October. So feasibly, there could be 25, 27 fungicides being applied during that period. Now, there's a decreasing number of effective fungicides available to us all. Some of those fungicides can only be applied certain times, or a certain number of times through the season. They don't get any cheaper. Everyone, I think, is thinking more about what they eat. It seems, certainly since we've had this global pandemic, it seems to me there's an even bigger focus on what we're eating. So residues of fungicides in fruit is going to become an ever greater, I think, light bulb flashing moment. And in line with that, you know, here in the UK, margins are getting tighter. And so anything we can do to reduce cost and target things more accurately, people are interested in. How does it work? Well, simply the sensor sits in the field. There's a little LORAF sitting in a crop of strawberries. It's sending its data every 15 minutes. We bring it into our portal. The algorithm sits in the background, accumulates the number of disease hours, and it's presented to the grower as an ascending green line. That green line turns to amber at 115 hours and turns red at 125 hours, saying, come on, get on with it, you need to get out and spray. But it's down to the grower to evaluate when it's the right time to spray for that fungicide. If the graph is accumulating very quickly, we're getting hour after hour after hour of above 18 and 60%, he may decide, or they may decide, actually, we're only going to go to 90 hours before we spray. So I think the important thing is these disease models are really useful tools, but common sense has got to prevail. It's how you interpret and use them is the key thing. They don't farm for you. We assume that when your fungicide is sprayed onto the plant, it kills all stages of the fungus. We're assuming you've got good spray coverage when you do that. Clearly, if your sprayer's not up to it, you need to be taking that into consideration too. And after you've applied that fungicide, it's entered onto the system and it resets our model back down to 0. So these are the sort of graphs that we're more used to seeing. Hours of accumulation here. You can see at 115, it turns to amber. It then turns to red. The grower sprays. He enters that into the system. It brings the model back down to 0 and the reaccumulation process starts. Now, to give you an idea of, I should just add, yeah, so we, as I mentioned earlier, the high risk areas, when I would say above 110 hours, really, you're into the high risk. Medium risk is anything from 50 up to 110, and below 50 is a low risk. Now, what's interesting is when we look at two different graphs from the same time period, and these growers are within a kilometre and a half of each other, same variety. One's following the traditional 7-day program, one's following the model. And what you can see from the 7-day program, only once did we exceed 50 hours. Now, bear in mind, I just said 50 hours or less is low risk. You can see here, I mean, there are times here when we barely accumulated 15 or 17 hours of risk before we went in and sprayed. Whereas this grower down here is following the model. He may not go always to 100 hours or 125 hours. In fact, on the first spray, he only went to 75 as he was gaining confidence, but he's using it intelligently. And the net result of that, for that particular grower 2 years ago, and this is very similar to the slide that Jenny showed earlier, his best practice program was putting on 20 fungicides through the season. Using the model, he applied 15, so he put 5 less applications on. We then asked him, well, what is the cost of the fungicide per hectare and what's your sprayer cost per hectare? Added all that up together and he was coming out with a saving of just over £400. So actually not dissimilar to what Jenny was coming out with in terms of a saving per hectare. That was 2019. What I can tell you is 2020, he did 22 sprays using his farmer's best practice system, and the prediction system, he only put on 11. This time last year, we're now experiencing our coldest spring in 100 years. This time last year, it was our hottest spring in 100 years, pretty much, with really bright conditions, high temperatures, low humidities. And so our risk of accumulation was creeping very, very slowly. In fact, many growers using the model went for the whole month of May without spraying for mildew because of those conditions. So that's where his savings were made. I appreciate I've hit you with a lot of information. There may well be questions that you want to ask, but I'd like to thank you for listening to me. And I'd like to thank the team at METOS for inviting me to take part in this and for putting on such a great afternoon or evening, or morning indeed, for everybody, because it's a really important topic that we're discussing here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That you covered a lot of really important topics. And I guess, is everybody seeing my screen here right now?
Yep.
Okay. So, one of the things, and both you and Jenny touched on it, is that utilizing a disease model in some way, shape, or form to help you, understand what are the environmental impacts that you're seeing out there in the field. It has a very substantial fiscal response. You're making applications when they're needed, and not just essentially spraying money out the window. You'd mentioned, I guess before I get into that, you'll go through, if anybody wants to know, the base models that we have available. If you go to metos.at and then click through our disease, you can see, we talked about strawberries, raspberries, a couple of the softberry crops here, but we have over 80 models that are available on over 40 crops. And this list is growing continually. It's not something that's static. It's something that, as new things come up, we're working really hard to improve this and make it be a resource for any grower out there in the field. And then the other thing, the other important thing is a lot of these models, or I guess all of these models, these aren't just, they're not something that we're putting together. We're partnering with researchers such as Dr. Broome and other academia resources to create these models to make them for you. One thing that Simon showcased very, very well is what can you do, or what can your business do with these tools? What kind of an API interface can you create? A lot of the stuff that you saw through Simon's packages, a lot of the sensors were, they're METOS sensors that are they're feeding into a website that he designed to basically be a grower facing website. So if you're interested in something like that, if you have an existing customer facing app or website or a tool like that, and you're wondering, how can I incorporate some of these things? How can I, take some of the information that my weather stations or that my moisture probes or any of my stations out in the field are providing and put that into something? Please reach out to your local METOS representative. We can get you in contact with the API support team. We can help you to build whatever it is that you're trying to do. At the end of the day, our main goal is to help connect. There's a lot of different aspects to this puzzle. There's the technology, there's the software, but more importantly, there's the boots on the ground, as Simon and Jenny have both kind of said is a crucial aspect of this. You've got to have people out there, and our technology is only as good as the people that are supporting it and that are putting it into fantastic models like Simon is. So, we can get you a part of the way there, but we still need to have, quality partners, quality people in the field that are implementing these things, and we're all working towards the same goal. It's written right there across the bottom. If we could have, if we could have a mission statement, I would imagine this is what it would be: better management, optimize input, risk reduction equals higher return on investment. There are other intangible things that we've talked about today, such as the social aspect and the environmental aspect. But what I think we really can take away is it's not just one device silver bullet. There is a systems approach to this whole process, whether that's your insect monitoring, which we've talked about in the past, work tracking, being able to know, not only are the conditions right for a specific pathogen to flourish, but is the time right? Is the atmosphere right for me to go and apply something onto it? Because you could get into a situation where you might have a high risk of a disease out there, but the environment is just not conducive to you going and actually applying chemical on it. And it's not going to be efficient if you do. And we've talked about frost and weather stress. There's a lot more to this toolbox than I think meets the eye. And if there's one takeaway, it's that I would hope to portray to everybody listening today is that reach out to us and see how can we help build something like this that fits for you. What can we do to pair some of these products together so that you can take it to either your operation or your growers and create something that builds a positive return on investment. So with that, I know we have a couple of questions here. Keep asking them. I'll go through these. I think some of these are for you, Jenny. So I want to know, any bioproducts are available for organic production disease management?
Yeah, in that one trial, we looked at Serenade and microthiol, so that there are products that are organic that help with powdery mildew and with botrytis. Of course, they're a little tricky and often don't have sort of what's called kickback or activity to kind of stop an infection that's already happening, whereas some of the conventional products do have 24 to 72 hour kickback. So it is more challenging, but actually that only makes your monitoring your microclimate even more important. And you can actually also do cultural practices like the tunnel venting, and you can use a weather station to confirm that doing that tunnel venting may change the conditions. So yeah, I would say it is important for organic growers on multiple fronts because of the tools you've got, and then the importance of cultural practices, which you can confirm with the weather data.
Excellent. My next one I think is also for you. And I guess this could be for a number of us. How many farmers are already working with these models? So I guess we'll start with you. How many of your strawberry farmers are working with these?
Well, that's where you got me. I'm not sure that many are. I wish more were. I actually think Simon might have a better answer. At least I'm aware that I think it is more fully integrated. Again, with I think the more sophisticated tunneled substrate production systems, it's I think a more easy sell. So I know of a few growers, but it isn't as many as it should. My desire right now is to get our test plots, so at least our model farms are doing it, and we're not doing that much of that yet either, to be honest. So I think in the wine grape industry, many more are, but in the berry, we're still a little slow in California. Florida, actually, there is more going on there under the leadership of Natalia Perez, and some of our growers are using it. So I need to get a better answer on the actually number, and you're going to inspire me to do that. So I'll get back to you.
Excellent. Simon, how about you?
I think I concur with Jenny, actually. It's surprisingly few. And I think part of the reason is it's perhaps a lack of confidence in the technology still. You know, I mentioned in one of my slides, it's an insurance policy, the 7-day sprays insurance. I'm definitely not going to get mildew if I go in every 7 days. And that's the thought process when actually, if you think it through logically, actually it could be detrimental what they're doing there. And you sort of touched on that. So I think it's a barrier that we still need to get through. Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at the numbers, you think, well, why wouldn't they be doing it? Why isn't everyone doing it? But yeah, I think we're still going through that. The early adopters have just started to take it, and I guess there'll be a lot of people sitting on the fence watching them, and they'll slowly hop off and come on board, I expect.
And I think that can be seen across all crops, you know, especially, you know, throughout what we deal with in the United States is the guys that are, or not the guys, the growers that are more progressive are seeing it. They're testing it themselves and seeing for their own eyes and realizing these large return on investment, or these huge savings that they can see when just trusting in the model. And the more that we realize that over the next couple of years, I definitely think adoption rate will go up, and with that, more of a demand will just create more different options and more things for us to work with. So thank you both for that answer. This one is for I believe well, either of you can answer. Does the application of sulfur affect the Brix degrees of the fruit?
I think in as much as it can be stressful, especially sulfur dust, which I don't know how much that's done elsewhere, but it is used in California. But, you know, I don't think we've looked at that, because you could almost imagine it might actually increase the Brix due to sort of plant stress, but I don't have a measured, a research-based answer for that. I'd be curious if anybody else knows about that, but I could imagine it could, but it might even in a positive way, but I'm not sure. Okay.
There are a couple questions on here. A couple of people have been reaching out to ask if it's possible to receive these files. What I will say is we will make this video available for anybody to watch anytime they choose. If you're wanting actual hard copies of presentations, reach out to marketing at metos.at, and they can help you get the information that you need or get in contact. Jenny, one more for you. Do you have growers in Canada around the Niagara region?
We do have growers in, I think it's around a little north of the Niagara region. Like I think we're gearing up to be doing more in Canada. So if someone's interested or a grower, they should reach out to the company. We're very interested in what we're calling local for local. So growing locally in some greenhouse facilities to supply. Canadians eat a lot of berries. I'm not quite sure why, but they do. So, they're not a huge population, they on a per population basis. So we're very excited to expand there. I know we're around Quebec, and I know we're somewhere north of the Great Lakes, and here's my Canadian geography is a little lacking, I hate to say, but yes, we do grow in Canada.
And as far as a Meadows standpoint, to answer, I mean, we do have a fairly large presence in Canada as well. So if you're, I can get you in contact with Guy Ash, our general manager for that region, if you're wanting to inquire about product support in that area as well. I think the last question that we'll have time for today is, can I use a Centec device without having the full station? And the answer is absolutely. So there are a multitude of different configurations that we can work together depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Not every station has to be a fully loaded weather station. We can customize these things for whatever the use case is. So again, reach out to your local METOS rep in your country and just have the conversation. Say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and we can talk through what needs to happen to make sure that you're all set up with however you want to get. So with that, I think that's all the questions. Again, Simon, Jenny, great presentations, great information. I thank you both for being here. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Really a great group of people. And I really love to connect with Simon some more in the future too. So.
No, likewise, Jenny, I'll concur with that. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Great to meet you all. It's been really good. Very worthwhile.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll see you next month.
Okay.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.